The story between Jenny and Sumit has always been one of the most emotional and controversial relationships in the entire 90 Day Fiancé universe. For years, fans have watched their love story unfold through moments of hope, heartbreak, betrayal, forgiveness, and constant pressure from family and culture. But now, a new moment is raising serious questions about whether their marriage can truly survive what happened next. Because this time, the tension wasn't hidden behind private conversations or quiet arguments. This moment happened right in front of the cameras, and when it did, viewers saw something they had never seen before. Jenny breaking down in a way that suggested she may have finally reached her limit. For those who have followed Jenny and Sumit from the beginning, their story started with an online relationship that quickly turned complicated. Sumit initially hid his true identity from Jenny when they first met online, pretending to be someone else before eventually revealing the truth. Despite that shocking revelation, Jenny chose to continue the relationship. She traveled across the world to India to be with him, believing their love was strong enough to overcome anything. But almost immediately, new obstacles appeared. The biggest challenge came from Sumit's family. His parents strongly disapproved of the relationship, especially because Jenny is significantly older than Sumit and comes from a completely different culture. In many ways, their relationship became a battle between two worlds. On one side was Jenny, who believed love should be enough. On the other side was Sumit's family, who believed tradition and family approval were more important than personal feelings. Over the years, viewers watched the tension grow. There were arguments, ultimatums, emotional confrontations, and moments when it seemed like the relationship might collapse entirely. Yet somehow, Jenny and Sumit always managed to come back together. Eventually, after years of struggle, the couple finally married. For a brief moment, it looked like their story had reached a happy ending. But as longtime fans of the show know, peace rarely lasts long in the world of 90 Day Fiancé. Recently, a new situation brought the old conflict back to the surface. The issue once again involved Sumit's loyalty to his family versus his commitment to Jenny. According to the latest developments surrounding the couple, the tension began building when discussions about family expectations resurfaced. Sumit has always struggled with balancing his role as a son with his role as a husband. In many cultures, especially in traditional Indian families, parents expect a strong level of respect and obedience from their children, even when they become adults. Jenny, however, has always wanted to feel like she comes first in Sumit's life. From her perspective, after everything she sacrificed to move to another country and build a life with him, she deserves to be his priority. This difference in expectations created a quiet but growing tension between them. Then came the moment that shocked viewers. During a conversation captured on camera, Sumit was faced with a difficult question about where his loyalty truly lies. When the topic of his parents came up again, the atmosphere immediately changed. Jenny's expression shifted. Fans could see the concern in her face before the conversation even fully began. As the discussion continued, Sumit appeared hesitant. Instead of giving a clear answer that reassured Jenny, he paused. His silence spoke volumes. In that moment, the cameras captured something powerful. Jenny realized that the same issue that had haunted their relationship for years might still be unresolved. And then came the reaction that stunned viewers. Jenny's voice began to shake as she spoke. She reminded Sumit of everything she had given up to be with him. She talked about leaving her home, her family, and her comfort behind to start a new life in India. For years, she had endured criticism, rejection, and emotional stress because she believed their love was worth fighting for. But now she was asking a simple question. Was she truly his priority? Sumit struggled to respond. The tension in the room became almost unbearable. For a few seconds that felt much longer, he simply froze. Viewers watching the scene could see the conflict on his face. He clearly cared about Jenny, but the pressure from his family still weighed heavily on him. That hesitation changed everything. Jenny leaned back and looked at him with a mixture of sadness and frustration. It was the kind of look that suggested someone who had reached an emotional breaking point. For years she had defended their relationship to critics who said it would never work. She had stood by Sumit through lies, through family rejection, and through endless drama. But now she seemed to be asking herself a painful question. Had she been fighting a battle she could never truly win? As the silence stretched on, Jenny finally spoke words that shocked fans of the show. She said she felt tired. Tired of the same argument. Tired of feeling like she had to compete with his family for her place in his life. And tired of waiting for things to finally change. Her voice cracked as she said something that immediately caught the attention of viewers. She said she didn't know how much more she could take. In that moment, the emotional weight of their entire relationship seemed to come crashing down all at once. The cameras captured Sumit looking stunned, almost as if he hadn't expected Jenny to reach this point. For years, she had always found a way to forgive and move forward. But this time felt different. Fans watching the episode quickly began reacting online. Many viewers expressed sympathy for Jenny, saying they understood why she felt exhausted after so many years of conflict. Others defended Sumit, pointing out how difficult it can be to stand against family expectations in certain cultures. Regardless of where people stood, one thing became clear. This moment felt like a turning point. For the first time, it looked like Jenny might truly be considering walking away from the relationship she had spent years fighting to protect. And the question now spreading across the 90-Day Fiancé fan community is simple but powerful. Is this the moment that finally ends Jenny and Sumit's marriage? Because if history has taught fans anything about their relationship, it's that every time things seem stable, another challenge appears. But this time, the emotional damage might run deeper than ever before. And the next decision Jenny makes could change everything. As the tension in the room continued to build, the silence between Jenny and Sumit became almost unbearable. For viewers watching the moment unfold, it was clear that this was not just another argument. This was something deeper. Something that had been building quietly for years beneath the surface of their relationship. Jenny sat there looking at Sumit, waiting for the answer she had been hoping to hear for so long. Not just words, but reassurance. Proof that after everything they had been through, she truly came first in his life. But Sumit's hesitation lingered in the air. His face showed conflict, the kind that comes from being pulled in two completely different directions. On one side was the woman he married, the woman who moved across the world to be with him, the woman who had stood beside him through years of controversy and criticism. On the other side were his parents, whose expectations and cultural values had shaped his entire life. For Sumit, the decision was never simple. In many traditional families, loyalty to parents is not seen as optional. It is seen as a responsibility that lasts a lifetime. But for Jenny, that explanation had begun to lose its meaning. She had heard it before, over and over again, each time hoping things would eventually change, each time believing that love would finally win. Yet here they were again, standing in the exact same place emotionally that they had been years earlier. Jenny's expression slowly shifted from frustration to something much more painful. Disappointment. She shook her head slightly, almost as if she couldn't believe the conversation was happening again. For a moment she looked away from Sumit, trying to gather her thoughts. When she finally spoke again, her voice carried a quiet exhaustion that viewers immediately noticed. She told him that she had spent years defending their relationship to people who said it would never work. Friends, strangers, and even viewers of the show had warned her that the cultural differences between them might always create conflict. But Jenny refused to believe that. She believed their love was strong enough to overcome those obstacles. She believed that once they were married, things would be different. That they would finally be able to live their lives without constantly fighting the same battle. But now she was starting to question whether that dream had ever been realistic. Sumit listened quietly, his eyes focused on her as she spoke. He looked like someone who understood her pain but didn't know how to fix it. That helplessness only made the moment more intense, because sometimes silence says more than words ever could. Jenny leaned forward slightly and reminded him of everything they had survived together. The lies that almost ended their relationship in the beginning. The family confrontations that brought both of them to tears. The legal complications and social pressure that came with their marriage. Through all of that, she had stayed. She had forgiven. She had chosen to keep fighting for their relationship even when it felt impossible. But now she asked a question that seemed to freeze the entire moment in place. She asked Sumit if he truly believed their marriage could survive if his parents always came first. It wasn't asked with anger. It was asked with honesty. And that honesty made the question even more powerful. Sumit took a deep breath before answering. For a moment it looked like he might finally say something decisive, something that would reassure Jenny and calm the tension between them. But instead, his response remained uncertain. He spoke about how much he loved Jenny. He reminded her that he chose to marry her despite the pressure from his family. But he also admitted that cutting his parents out of his life completely was something he struggled with emotionally. That confession hit Jenny hard, not because she didn't understand his feelings, but because it confirmed the fear she had been carrying for years. The fear that she might always be second place in his life. The room fell silent again. Jenny looked down for a moment, processing everything he had just said. When she finally looked back up at him, her eyes were filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. She told him something that instantly caught the attention of viewers. She said love should not feel like a competition. She said a marriage should not feel like a constant test of loyalty. And she said she didn't want to spend the rest of her life wondering where she truly stood in his priorities. Those words seemed to hit Sumit harder than anything else she had said during the conversation. For years, Jenny had been patient. She had waited for things to improve. She had hoped that time would slowly heal the tension between her and his family. But now it sounded like that patience was finally reaching its limit. The emotional weight of the moment became even more intense when Jenny said something that many fans of the show never expected to hear from her. She said she didn't know if she could keep doing this forever. That sentence hung in the air like a warning. For viewers who had watched their story unfold across multiple seasons, it felt like a major turning point. Because Jenny had always been the one fighting to keep the relationship alive. She had been the one willing to endure the challenges for the sake of their love. Hearing her question whether she could continue was something entirely new. Sumit's reaction showed how serious the moment had become. He immediately tried to reassure her, explaining that he didn't want to lose her. He told her she meant everything to him and that he never wanted her to feel like she was second in his life. But Jenny gently shook her head as he spoke. She told him that words alone were no longer enough. What she needed now were actions. Real changes that showed their marriage truly came first. That statement revealed something important about how much the relationship had evolved. In the early days of their story, Jenny was willing to accept promises and hope for the best. But after everything they had been through, she now needed something more solid. Something that proved their future together was secure. As the conversation continued, both of them seemed emotionally drained. It was clear that neither of them wanted the relationship to end. But it was equally clear that the same unresolved issue was still threatening their happiness. Viewers watching the scene could feel the uncertainty surrounding their future. Would Sumit finally find a way to balance his family responsibilities with his marriage? Or had the years of tension already created damage that could not be repaired? The answer remained unclear. What made the moment even more powerful was the realization that this was not just a television storyline. This was a real relationship facing a real emotional crossroads. Jenny eventually stood up from where she was sitting, taking a slow breath as if trying to steady herself. She looked at Sumit one more time before saying something that left fans across the 90-Day Fiancé community wondering what would happen next. She told him she needed time to think. Time to reflect on everything they had been through and what their future might look like. It wasn't a dramatic exit or a loud argument. Instead, it was something much quieter but far more serious. It was the kind of moment that suggests someone is truly questioning whether they can continue down the same path. As Jenny walked away from the conversation, Sumit remained sitting there, staring ahead in silence. His expression showed a mixture of regret, confusion, and fear about what might come next. For the first time in a long time, it looked like he was realizing just how much he could lose if things didn't change. And for fans of the show, the moment left a powerful question hanging in the air. Is this just another difficult chapter in Jenny and Sumit's complicated love story? Or is it the beginning of the end for one of the most talked about couples in the entire 90-Day Fiancé franchise? Only time will reveal the answer. But one thing is certain. Their story is far from over. But this time, the emotional damage might run deeper than ever before. And the next decision Jenny makes could change everything. As the tension in the room continued to build, the silence between Jenny and Sumit became almost impossible to ignore. It was the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. For years their relationship had been tested again and again, but in this moment, something felt different. Jenny looked at Sumit with tired eyes, the kind of look that comes from someone who has carried the same emotional weight for far too long. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't even angry anymore. Instead, there was a calm seriousness in her expression that made the moment feel even heavier. Because sometimes when someone stops fighting loudly, it means they have started thinking about something much more serious. Sumit noticed that change immediately. For years he had seen Jenny frustrated, emotional, and sometimes even heartbroken. But this quiet calmness was unfamiliar. It made him uneasy in a way he hadn't felt before. He tried to read her expression, trying to understand what she might be thinking, but Jenny seemed lost in her own thoughts. The cameras captured every second of the moment as the distance between them felt larger than ever. Finally Jenny spoke, but her voice was softer than before. She said she had spent so many years believing that their love story was special, something powerful enough to survive any challenge that came their way. She remembered the first time she traveled across the world to meet Sumit in person, the excitement she felt, the hope that filled her heart when she imagined the life they could build together. Back then she believed that love could conquer anything. But now she wondered if love alone had been enough. She reminded Sumit that she had given up everything familiar to be with him. Her home, her friends, her comfortable life in America, all of it had been left behind so they could be together in India. She didn't regret choosing him, she made that clear. But what hurt was the feeling that even after all those sacrifices she still had to prove her place in his life again and again. Sumit listened quietly, his expression slowly turning more serious with every word she spoke. He knew she was right about many things she was saying. Their relationship had been filled with moments where she had to endure criticism and rejection, especially from his family. Even after they married, the tension with his parents had never completely disappeared. Jenny continued speaking, explaining that she had always tried to be understanding about the cultural differences between them. She knew that in many traditional families the expectations placed on children were very strong, especially when it came to respecting parents. She had never asked Sumit to stop loving his family. She had never asked him to erase that part of his life. What she wanted was something much simpler. She wanted to feel secure as his wife. She wanted to know that their marriage came first when difficult decisions appeared. Sumit shifted slightly where he stood, clearly struggling with the weight of the conversation. He loved Jenny, that much was obvious, but the conflict between his role as a son and his role as a husband had always complicated things. Growing up, he had been taught that family loyalty was everything. The idea of disappointing his parents had always been painful for him. But standing there now, looking at Jenny, he realized something important. If he continued trying to satisfy everyone, he might end up losing the one person who had always stood by him. Jenny then asked a question that immediately changed the tone of the moment. She asked him what their life would look like in the future if nothing changed. Would they still be having the same conversation years from now? Would she still feel like she was competing for her place in his life? The question forced Sumit to think about something he had avoided for a long time. The truth was that he didn't know what the future would look like if he continued handling things the same way. Jenny watched him carefully, waiting for an answer, but when he hesitated again, the disappointment on her face returned. She sighed quietly and shook her head. It wasn't anger that filled her expression now, it was exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that builds after years of repeating the same emotional conversation. She told him she didn't want their marriage to feel like a constant struggle anymore. She didn't want to spend the rest of her life hoping things would finally improve someday. She wanted peace. Those words echoed in the quiet space between them. For the first time in a long while, Sumit looked genuinely afraid of what might happen next. He stepped closer to her and tried to explain how much she meant to him. He reminded her that despite everything he had chosen to marry her. He had stood against his family before, and he believed their love was worth protecting. But Jenny gently interrupted him again. She said she knew he loved her. That had never been the question. The real question was whether their marriage would always have to fight against the same obstacle over and over again. Because love could survive many challenges, but constant emotional stress could slowly wear even the strongest relationships down. Sumit finally admitted something he had rarely said so openly before. He admitted that he had often hoped the situation with his family would simply improve over time without him having to force a difficult decision. He thought that if everyone was patient enough, Eventually things would settle down naturally. But now he was beginning to realize that waiting might not fix the problem. Jenny looked at him carefully as he said this. For a moment there was a small hint of hope in her eyes, as if she wanted to believe that he truly understood the seriousness of the situation now. But years of disappointment had made her cautious. She told him that understanding the problem was only the first step. What mattered now was what he chose to do about it. The conversation slowed again as both of them stood there quietly, thinking about the road ahead. Their relationship had always been complicated, but it had also been filled with moments of deep connection and genuine love. That history made the possibility of losing each other even more painful to imagine. Jenny eventually took a deep breath and looked away toward the distance, as if searching for clarity in her thoughts. When she spoke again, her voice carried a mixture of sadness and determination. She said she needed time to think about everything. Not just the argument they had just had, but their entire journey together. She needed to decide whether the life she had built with Sumit was the life she truly wanted to continue living. Those words hit Sumit like a shock. For the first time, he realized that Jenny might actually be considering walking away from the relationship they had fought so hard to protect. He tried to say something to stop her from leaving, but the words didn't come easily. Because deep down, he knew that if things were going to change, it would require more than promises. It would require real action. Jenny slowly turned and began walking away, leaving Sumit standing there in silence once again. The cameras captured his expression as he watched her go, a mixture of regret, fear, and realization spreading across his face. In that moment, it became clear that their story had reached a critical turning point. For years, their relationship had survived lies, cultural pressure, and family conflict. But now they were facing something even more difficult. The possibility that emotional exhaustion might finally be stronger than love. And for viewers watching their journey unfold, one question remained at the center of it all. Will Jenny decide that their love is still worth fighting for? Or will this finally be the moment when she chooses to walk?